The moment the doctor pronounced me dead, my world didn't fade to black. It shattered into a million shards of memory and regret, each one sharper than the last. I felt the cold earth, the stifling darkness of the coffin, the utter silence that was my eternity. And then I woke up. I was on the floor of my living room, the taste of salt from my own tears still on my lips. My husband, Leo, was standing over me, his face a mask of frustration rather than concern. The argument was still ringing in my ears. The same argument that had killed me. "Clara, are you even listening to me? This theatrics won't work. I'm bringing Diana home and that's final." Diana. His first love. The woman who had gotten into a car accident a month ago. An accident Leo believed was his fault because he'd asked her to meet him. They'd switched seats moments before the collision, a twist of fate that saved him and cost her a leg. Now he was consumed by a guilt so profound it eclipsed our 35-year marriage. In my previous life, the one that ended just 7 days from now, I had screamed. I had cried. I had refused, my heart breaking at the thought of another woman, his first love, moving into the home we built together. That refusal had led to stress, to exhaustion, to a collapse no one saw coming. I died of a heart attack, alone and forgotten, while Leo and Diana went to the courthouse to get their marriage certificate on the very day they buried me. The knowledge of that future, of my own ignored suffering, was a cold, hard stone in my chest the moment I was reborn. It consumed every ounce of my irrational, hopeful heart. So when Leo lost his temper again, his voice echoing in the room where I had just died, I didn't fight it. I pushed myself up from the floor, my body aching with a phantom pain. "Fine," I said, my voice unervingly calm. "Go get her." Leo's tirade cut off. He stared at me, his anger replaced by stunned disbelief. "What?" I said, "Go get her. When it comes to life and death, everything else is trivial." The words were true in a way he could never understand. I am 55 years old. I have already died once. What else is there that I can't let go of? All I want now is to cling to life, to survive. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. "Clara, she's disabled now. She has no one else to rely on but me. It's not like I have a choice." I nodded, a gesture so indifferent it felt foreign. I walked to my bag, pulled out my insurance card and held it up. "Let's go. You're coming with me." His eyes widened as if he didn't recognize me. And why would he? Just 30 minutes ago, I was the shrieking harpy he resented. Now I was a placid stranger. I didn't bother to explain. I simply turned and walked out the door. The drive to the hospital was silent. Leo's face was emotionless, but through the rearview mirror I saw it. The small, unconscious gesture he made when he was thrilled. He was rubbing his palms together over and over. After 35 years, I know what every one of his tiny movements means. It was the joy of long resistance finally giving way, the dream coming true. I laughed at myself, a bitter, silent sound, and pulled into the hospital parking lot. I headed straight for the emergency department. Leo grabbed my arm, flustered. "You're going the wrong way. Diana is in the inpatient ward." I gave a sarcastic laugh and shook him off. "You go get her yourself. I'm about to die. I want to get checked out and see what's wrong with me." I wasn't that generous. I wouldn't personally fetch his precious Diana. The only reason I'd even come to this hospital was for a full physical. I had to know what hidden illness was ticking inside me. Leo looked me up and down, his frustration returning. "You only fainted because you were emotionally overwhelmed. You were out for 2 minutes. You're not sick. You sounded so reasonable, I thought you were finally accepting this, but it turns out you're just cursing yourself to make me feel guilty." I shook my head. "You're overthinking it. Don't worry, I'm not going to stand in your way. In my previous life I had fought with everything I had and it changed nothing. Now, having already died once, it was time to suppress my emotional brain and make the most rational decision. In this life I would step aside. I spent the entire day going through every scan imaginable. Ultrasounds, blood panels, stress tests. In the end, the doctor concluded that aside from slightly high blood pressure, there was nothing seriously wrong. "You're getting older," he said kindly. "You need to get more rest." I exhaled a breath I felt I'd been holding for a lifetime. The fear of a hidden cancer, a chronic condition, was alleviated. My death had been from pure, unadulterated stress. It was a death I could prevent. By the time I left the hospital and got home, it was pitch dark outside. I opened the door to my home and was greeted with a wave of laughter and cheer. But the moment I stepped inside, the sound stopped cold. My daughter Maya stood up from the couch, her face a picture of displeasure. "Mom, where were you? You knew Aunt Diana was moving in today. Why didn't you get her room ready?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to hold back the urge to slap her. This was the daughter I carried for 10 months, the one I gave everything for. And now she was siding with another woman to push me out. The pain of that betrayal, fresh from my past life, cut deep. I didn't say a word. Then Diana pushed herself over in her wheelchair. "Clara," she said softly, her voice a practiced, gentle tremor. "I've caused you enough trouble. I'll leave right away." Leo's face changed in an instant. He pointed a finger at me, his voice exploding in the room. "Diana has no way out. Can't you show some compassion? Forcing her to leave? Is that what you want? You want her to go and die?" My face darkened. The memories flooded back. Our last wedding anniversary, Leo had bailed on our dinner plans because Diana had just returned from abroad and asked to see him. On her way to meet him, the accident happened. He was consumed by guilt, believing he owed her his life. And now he expected me to become her live-in nurse. "Fine," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'll leave. Is that what you want?" I walked into our bedroom. As expected, my clothes were scattered all over the floor. I didn't bother to fold them. I just stuffed everything into a suitcase. When I stood up, I saw them. Fresh gardenias on the nightstand and brand new expensive bedsheets on the bed. My chest tightened, a sharp, painful squeeze. Leo always said he wasn't the romantic type, that he didn't have a flair for sweet gestures. But he remembered that Diana loved gardenias. Some people don't lack ability, I thought, my heart turning to ice. They just lack the heart. "What are you throwing a tantrum about now?" Leo snapped from the doorway. "If you leave, who's going to take care of Diana?" "Mom, Dad, and I both have to work," Maya chimed in, her tone implying I was a petulant child. "You're at home with nothing to do. All we're asking is for you to cook a little and chat with Aunt Diana. It's not hard. In my last life, I gave in. I took care of Diana and died a pitiful death for it. This time I just want to live." "If you love her so much," I said coldly, "then take care of her yourselves." I reached into my bag, pulled out the divorce papers I had printed this afternoon after my checkup, and tossed them in Leo's face. "Sign this. You can take care of her in bed for all I care. No one's stopping your true love." Leo's face went dark. He gritted his teeth, bent down, and picked up the papers. When he saw what they were, his expression shifted to pure shock. "Are you crazy?" "I'm not crazy," I said, zipping my suitcase shut. "I just want to live. I had dropped dead in my last life because they ran me into the ground. I wouldn't make that mistake again." The silence that followed my declaration was louder than any scream. Leo stared at the divorce papers in his hand as if they were written in a foreign language. Maya's mouth was agape, her earlier arrogance replaced by sheer confusion. "You can't be serious," Leo finally stammered, the papers trembling slightly in his grip. "I've never been more serious in my life," I said, my voice flat. The weight of my suitcase felt like an anchor, tethering me to my new resolve. "You have your freedom. You have her. What more do you need from me?" A signed permission slip. Diana, from her wheelchair in the hallway, let out a soft, choked sob. "Oh, Leo, look what I've done. I've torn your family apart. I never meant for this to happen. Just send me back to the hospice. It's where I belong." It was a perfect performance. Retreat to advance. A masterstroke of manipulation that I had fallen for countless times before. But not this time. I could see the calculations behind her watery eyes. Maya, ever the devoted acolyte, rushed to her side. "Aunt Diana, don't say that. This isn't your fault." She turned her fury on me. "Mom, how can you be so cruel? Aunt Diana is a good person. Why can't you just accept her?" The words were a physical blow. 35 years of raising her, of sleepless nights and endless sacrifices, and this was my reward. She was choosing a stranger over her own mother. The memories of my past life, of Maya siding with Diana, believing her lies about my neglect, cut through me like shards of glass. I was shaking, trembling with a fury so profound it stole my breath. Before I could stop myself, my hand flew out and connected with Maya's cheek. The slap echoed in the sudden stillness of the room. "If you care about her so much," I hissed, my voice trembling with rage, "then you take care of her. Feed her, bathe her, treat her like your real mother." The image of Diana in my past life deliberately breaking cups, cutting her hands and then accusing me of abuse flashed before my eyes. Leo and Maya, blind and naive, had believed every word. My body had been exhausted, my spirit nearly suffocated. You want a divorce? Fine. Leo roared, his shock finally giving way to anger. He looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. But what? You're kicking your own daughter out of your life too? I stared at him, my heart a block of ice in my chest. I'm done with both of you. Their faces twisted in unison, a perfect mirror of hurt and outrage. They had never expected this. They expected tears, arguments, eventual submission. Not this cold, final severance. In the end, fueled by anger and the need to call my bluff, Leo signed the papers. His hand was jerky, the signature a messy scrawl. He threw the pen down as if it had burned him. I didn't wait for another word. I picked up my suitcase and walked out the door of the home I had tended for decades. The night air felt crisp, clean. It smelled like freedom. Mom, wait. Maya's voice called out, laced with a panic I hadn't heard in years. She ran after me, grabbing my arm. Mom, can you leave me some money? The request, so blatant and selfish, was the final nail in the coffin. I didn't even flinch. I pulled my arm away. You're an adult now. Time to stand on your own 2 feet. If you want money, go ask your dad. Her face fell, a mixture of shock and betrayal. She had chosen to stay with Leo, had declared she would take care of Diana in her old age. My heart, after all, wasn't made of iron. It still ached. But if I was not welcome, why should I fund my own replacement? I was not a masochist. I checked into a hotel downtown, a nice one with soft linens and room service. For the first time in decades, I slept until noon. The deep, dreamless sleep of the utterly unburdened. When I finally woke, the front desk called. I had visitors. As expected, it was Leo and Maya. They had both skipped work. A miracle, given how they never had time for me whenever I needed to go to the hospital. Maya stormed into the room, her cheeks still red. Mom, at your age, you're really pulling a runaway act? Aren't you afraid people will laugh at you? I sat up in bed, feeling a serenity I hadn't known was possible. Let them laugh. Who cares? I said flatly. I've spent a lifetime worrying about what people think. It's about time I broke free from all that. Right on cue, room service arrived with my lunch. I'd ordered everything I used to crave but never let myself have. An Australian lobster tail, asparagus with hollandaise, a delicate creme brulee. Maya's eyes widened in disbelief as the server laid out the dishes. Mom, you ordered all this? You're okay with eating like this? I didn't respond. I just picked up my fork and started eating. The taste was sublime. I had gotten used to a lifetime of sacrifice and they had gotten used to me doing it. But no more. Leo watched me, his expression uncomfortable. It's just taking care of Diana. It's not that big of a deal. You're not getting any younger. There's no need to make a scene. I took a sip of mineral water. Then either divorce me or send her away. Pick one. What? You think you can guilt trip me into playing housemaid for your sweetheart? Dream on. To the outside world, Leo was the perfect husband. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't hit me. The neighbors called him a saint. What they didn't see was the emotional labor, the mental load, the 1,000 tiny cuts of indifference. He never lifted a finger at home. Every request was a negotiation. He got all the praise, I got all the blame. Don't go too far. Leo's voice was low, a warning rumble. We're done, I said simply. Maya's grown. She doesn't need me. We don't have that many years left. Why can't we spend the rest of them the way we want? I tried to reason with him, my voice gentle but firm. After we're divorced, you'll be free. You can be with Diana. Didn't you always say you wanted to climb Mount Tai? She wouldn't stop you. Go for it. I could see him starting to shift, the idea of unfettered freedom appealing to him now that his guilt was being assuaged. I reached into my bag and pulled out another copy of the divorce agreement. I printed 20. I'm ready. You can have the house. I'll take the cash. It's a fair split. Leo stared at me and for the first time, it seemed to truly sink in that I wasn't bluffing. I truly meant it. And for the first time he looked uncertain, even afraid. Just then the hotel room door swung open. Maya stood there and behind her was Diana, being wheeled in by a hotel attendant. Of course. Maya's earlier phone call. She'd gone to fetch her. Diana's eyes immediately landed on the divorce papers on the table. Her face crumpled. I'm sorry, Clara. It's all my fault that your family's fallen apart. I never meant to come between you and Leo. Just send me back to the US. It was the same old song. The homeless widow with a lost son and daughter-in-law. A perfect, pathetic picture. Dad, you promised to take care of Aunt Diana. Maya snapped. She turned to me, her voice rising again. Mom, she's such a good person. Why can't you accept her? You're cruel. The loyalty she showed to this woman, a loyalty she had never granted me, was the final straw. Any lingering hope I had for my daughter evaporated. You want a divorce? Fine. Leo said, his pride wounded, his hand forced by Diana's presence. He snatched the pen and signed the second set of papers with a furious flourish. But don't come crying back to us when you're alone and old. I picked up the signed papers. It was done. As I walked out of the hotel room for the last time, my suitcase rolling behind me, I felt a decade younger. The air felt different. I was free. Maya grabbed my hand one last time, real panic in her eyes now that the reality was setting in. Mom, seriously, money. I looked at her, my daughter, a stranger to me now. You made your choice. Live with it. I didn't look back. I had a new life to build and only 7 days to start building it before my original expiration date. This time I intended to live. The silence of my new apartment was a symphony. After the hotel, I'd rented a small, sunny place on the other side of the city. It wasn't lavish, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every spoon in the drawer was chosen by me for me. There were no memories etched into the walls, no ghosts in the corners. Just clean, empty space waiting to be filled with a life of my own design. I didn't announce my divorce with a billboard, but in a town like ours, news has a life of its own. It started with colleagues noticing I wasn't wearing my wedding ring. A casual mention over coffee, Leo and I have parted ways, was all it took. The ripple effect was immediate and fascinating to observe. Reactions were a mixed bag. Some, like Mrs. Gable from accounting, looked at me with pity. Getting divorced at your age, Clara? What will you do with the rest of your life? It's so lonely. Others, like a young adjunct professor I barely knew, squeezed my arm and whispered, good for you. I wish I had your courage. The gossip buzzed around me, but for the first time I found I truly didn't care. Their whispers were just noise. You never know which will come first, tomorrow or the unexpected. I'd learned that the hard way. Better to live in the present and worry about the rest later. Amidst the whispers, a constant, warm presence emerged. Anna. The student I'd sponsored years ago. She'd heard about the divorce through the university grapevine and began showing up at my door with a frequency that was both touching and a little overwhelming. She'd help me unpack boxes, her movements efficient and sure. Aunt Claire, let me get that. It's too heavy for you. She'd stay for tea, filling the quiet with stories about her photography classes, her freelance gigs, the small fan base she was building online. Everyone said she was sucking up, trying to gain something from a lonely, newly single woman. I just laughed it off. I'd sponsored Anna for 6 years, from middle school through high school, after seeing her post on a charity forum. Both her parents were gone, and her older brother and sister-in-law, struggling in their rural village, were going to pull her out of school to work. Her grades were exceptional, her desperation palpable. I'd investigated, found it all true, and started sending money. I'll never forget the first time we met in person during her freshman orientation. Tears had welled in her eyes as she clutched my hands. Professor Clark, I can't repay you right now. I just want to stay close to you. He was fiercely proud. Once in college, she refused further financial help, opting for student loans and tutoring jobs to cover her tuition. He was always busy, always striving. I admired her deeply. Coming from nothing, making it to a top-tier university, it took more than persistence. It took grit. One afternoon, as we were arranging books on my new shelves, the intercom buzzed. It was Maya. She walked in, her eyes immediately scanning the apartment, judging. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes. The initial bravado from the hotel had faded. Nice place, she said, her tone implying the opposite. She spotted a simple nylon bag of sweet potatoes and dried mushrooms Anna had brought from her village, a heartfelt gift from her family. Maya scoffed. Kids these days don't know how to give real gifts. Can't even bring something valuable. I didn't bother arguing. I simply continued placing books on the shelf. She didn't sit. She just stood there looking worn down. Mom, there's no one to take care of Dad. It's the weekend. Can you go back and help out for a couple of days? It wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered with the expectation of immediate compliance. I let out a bitter laugh. This morning you called saying you missed me. Turns out you just wanted a free live-in maid. Maya had the decency to look slightly abashed, but it was quickly replaced by resentment. Mom, it's not just Dad. I'm also cooking and cleaning for Aunt Diana. I'm really tired. Can't you feel a little sorry for me? I stared at her, my gaze cold. And when I was the one taking care of both of them, who ever felt sorry for me? A live-in housekeeper makes thousands a month. I devoted decades of my life. Did anyone ever remember what I did? I'd heard through the grapevine that Leo had quit his job to take care of Diana full-time. When I'd asked why they didn't just hire a caregiver, Maya had rolled her eyes. What's the point of paying someone? It's not like they'd truly care. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. Funny, no one had ever cared like that for me. When I was sick, I lay in bed alone. Those two acted like I was some kind of superhero, capable of self-healing through sheer willpower. From now on, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument, anything related to Diana has nothing to do with me. I don't want to be asked. I don't want to be involved. We have no connection. Period. Before she left, Maya threw out a parting shot, her eyes hard. When you're old and sick, don't come begging me for help. I didn't say a word. I'd already stopped counting on that daughter a long time ago. The door closed behind her, and the peaceful silence of my apartment felt more valuable than ever. A few days later, on my way home from the university, I ran into Anna again. She spotted me and practically leapt across the street, her face a beacon of excitement. Aunt Clara. Wait there. Before I could respond, she darted into a nearby store and emerged moments later, drenched in sweat, a heavy nylon bag slung over her shoulder. Her face was flushed bright red. These are some local specialties from my hometown. I was going to bring them to your house, she said shyly, thrusting the bag at me. I peeked inside. Smoked pork, dried wild vegetables, homemade preserves. You know I love your family's smoked pork, I said with a genuine smile. Her entire face lit up, as radiant and dazzling as the brightest star. She offered to help me carry it home, but I declined. She looked a little disappointed but quickly perked up. Aunt Clara, I'll get going then. See you tomorrow. She ran off with a little bounce in her step, waving as she turned the corner, a cheerful bunny without a care in the world. I shook my head, smiling, and carried the heavy bag of kindness home myself. Time flew, and soon it was graduation season. The university grew quiet, and I found myself wondering how I'd fill the long summer months. Anna provided the answer. She invited me to travel with her. I frowned immediately, my old frugal habits kicking in. She grinned, leaning close. Aunt Claire, I've got money now. Remember when I was a kid and promised I'd take you traveling someday? Back then, she'd called me on her sister-in-law's battered phone, making grand promises I'd never taken seriously. But she had. She remembered every word. We decided our first stop would be Yunnan. The night before we were set to leave, my intercom buzzed again. It was Maya. She looked awkward, standing in my doorway, unable to meet my eyes. Mom, Marcus wants to get married. What should I do? Marcus. The name was a punch to the gut. Her ex-boyfriend. A lowlife with no stable job, a drifter who lived on charm and empty promises. After our divorce, despite my past objections, she'd gone running back to him. Make your own decision, I told her, my voice devoid of emotion. Just don't regret it. Back then I'd stepped in. I'd arranged a marriage for her with a decent man, a former student of mine named David. Handsome, well-educated, from a good family. They'd had a grand wedding. But she could never forget her first love, her true love, Marcus. In the end, she'd ruined her own marriage. Now I wouldn't interfere. She'd made her bed. She stood there, stunned. Mom used to talk me through things. Why aren't you saying anything now? I took a sip of water. If there's nothing else, you can go. The same conversations, the same cycles. I was sick of it. Emily's face darkened, a bitter smile twisting her lips. Aunt Diana was right. You just don't want me to be happy. You can't stand the idea of me marrying someone I actually like. Fine then. I'm marrying him. My chest tightened. I could hardly breathe. The audacity, the sheer blindness of it. Go, I said, clutching at my ribs, a familiar, terrifying pain blooming beneath my breastbone. After you leave, don't come back. I'll act like I never gave birth to you. She wanted to be heartless, so could I. Without me, who do you think you'll rely on when you're old? I'm your only family, she said, looking smug as if she held all the cards. That look, so superior, so cold, made the pain in my chest intensify. Get out, I said through gritted teeth. The moment the door closed, the pain exploded. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic runaway drum. I felt dizzy, nauseous. My hands shook so badly I could barely press the buttons. I dialed 911, then, my vision blurring, I called Anna. I was rushed to the hospital. Tachycardia brought on by extreme stress, the doctor said. Thankfully, it wasn't a heart attack. Not this time. Anna was at my bedside in minutes, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. Aunt Clara, please, she begged, her voice choked with sobs. Please let me move in with you. I can't stop worrying about you. I can't lose you. Her words, filled with a fear and love I hadn't experienced from my own blood, made my heart ache and swell at the same time. This whole ordeal had taught me a brutal lesson. People always say raising kids is a safeguard for old age. But if your children don't have a shred of gratitude, then they're not here to repay kindness. They're here for revenge. After a half-month of recovery, Anna finally moved in. It wasn't a discussion. It was a fait accompli. She arrived with a single suitcase and a determined look in her eye. I'm here to make sure you eat properly and don't overexert yourself, she announced, and began reorganizing my kitchen with a terrifying efficiency. The apartment, once a sanctuary of silence, now hummed with life. The smell of her herbal tea mingled with my coffee. Her camera equipment took up residence on the bookshelf. It should have felt like an intrusion, but it didn't. It felt like a guardrail had been installed on a precarious cliff edge. Once the doctor gave the all-clear, we finally took our trip to Yunnan. The plan was back on. The moment we stepped off the plane in Kunming, the world exploded in a riot of color and scent so different from our muted, familiar city. The air was thinner, sharper, scented with flowers and spices I couldn't name. Anna was a whirlwind of energy, her camera constantly clicking, capturing the vibrant textiles of the minority women, the mist-shrouded peaks in the distance, the dizzying arrays of street food. She took photos of me too. At first I was stiff, uncomfortable in front of the lens. Aunt Clara, just look at the mountains. Don't look at me, she'd laugh. She caught me sipping tea in a quiet courtyard, smiling at a group of playing children, haggling good-naturedly over a scarf. She captured a version of myself I hadn't seen in decades. A woman unburdened, curious, and quietly joyful. We tried everything. Crossing the bridge noodles, which arrived with a dozen little plates of ingredients to mix in. Strange, fragrant cheeses. Sweet flour pastries. We immersed ourselves in the old towns, getting lost in cobblestone alleys, listening to the ancient music drifting from tea houses. We met other travelers too. A retired Australian couple hiking the Tea Horse Road, a group of bohemian artists from Beijing, a solo backpacker from Spain. Every day was a new conversation, a new perspective. I felt my world, which had shrunk to the four walls of my unhappy marriage, expanding with every passing mile. One afternoon, sitting in a sun-drenched plaza in Lijiang, watching the world go by, Anna hugged her camera and ran over to me, her face alight with excitement. Aunt Clara, look. She showed me her phone. Her social media page was blowing up. We've gained even more followers. People are saying I should post more pictures of you. They love seeing you. I scrolled through the comments, a strange emotion bubbling up inside me. After Anna had shared our story online, how we'd met, how I'd supported her, our travels together, the response had been overwhelming. People were calling me Aunt Clara the Great. They said I had lifted her up onto a bigger stage, given her a new life. The comments were filled with thanks for my kindness. Tears pricked my eyes. But if I had truly pulled her from the mud, the one who deserved the most gratitude was still her. If I hadn't seen the wall of award certificates in her tiny, sparse village home, if I hadn't seen the burning, unextinguishable determination in her eyes, I might never have helped her. No one gives away money for nothing. Every act of generosity is still a kind of investment. I never expected anything in return, but my intention had always been a simple one: to help empower one more woman in this world. Our next stop should be Tibet, I said suddenly, the idea forming as I spoke. I've wanted to go for years, but I never had anyone to go with. Anna grinned and nodded enthusiastically. Then she paused, a more serious look crossing her face. Aunt Clara, are you sure I don't need to pay for anything? For this trip, I mean. Honestly, I'm a bit embarrassed. I haven't spent a single cent so far. She laughed, a bright, happy sound. Ever since I posted our story and photos, we blew up online. Businesses are offering us free meals and hotels just for the exposure. They're throwing ad money at us, trying to ride the wave. I've got a steady stream of income now, so don't worry. Drink, relax. I've got you covered. She winked. And when the money comes in, I'll split it with you. She playfully wrapped her arm around mine, beaming with joy. The sunlight lit up her face and she looked radiant, beautiful in a way that was so different from the shy, timid girl I'd met a decade ago. I couldn't help smiling. You don't need to share the money with me. I've got a pension. I've got savings. I don't lack anything. I was enjoying this carefree, joyful time on the road, truly feeling like I'd escaped my old life when my phone rang. It was Leo. His voice on the line was a jarring scratch on the record of my happiness. He sounded irritated, put out. Your daughter's getting married, he said, no greeting, no preamble. To that deadbeat. You should come back for the wedding. I didn't even hesitate. No. Just 2 weeks ago Maya had called me completely shameless. Mom, you need to give me at least $300,000 for the wedding. No, how are you? No, I miss you. Just a demand for money. I'd hung up right then and there. How generous did she expect me to be? I'd already given her a significant dowry for her first wedding to David. And now, for a second wedding to a man who had nothing, she was still trying to squeeze more out of me. Since the divorce, she hadn't asked once how I was doing. All she knew was how to take, never to give. No one owes someone like that endless patience. Not even their own mother. I hung up on Leo and turned back to Anna, who was watching me with concern. Everything okay? Everything is perfect, I said, and I meant it. Now, tell me more about these free hotels in Lessa. We kept traveling. I never went back to teaching. Anna was right. This was the best era to live in. Our days were filled with joy and discovery. We posted our photos and videos online, added a few tasteful ads, and money just rolled in. It wasn't like the old days, working hard day after day, saving penny by penny. The internet boom didn't just support us financially. It introduced me to people from all walks of life, gave me opportunities one never imagined, and opened my eyes to a much wider world. As the new year approached, a sense of quiet contentment settled over me. The prophecy of my death had passed. I was alive, truly alive, and the world was full of possibility. We finally returned home, my suitcase full of souvenirs and my heart full of new memories. The next day my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Leo standing there. He looked me up and down, his expression complicated. I looked healthier, tanned, and there was a lightness in my posture that hadn't been there before. Ever since you left, he said, his voice grudging, you've been doing better. Your life looks so full. I smiled but didn't say anything. After that hospital stay caused by Maya's outburst, I'd blocked both of them completely. They couldn't contact me unless they borrowed a phone. Leo had probably seen me online. At this point, I was something of a minor internet celebrity. Plenty of relatives and old friends had heard about it. I leaned against the doorframe. Cut to the chase, Leo. Why are you here? He had changed. His back was hunched as if carrying a mountain. His clothes hung loosely on his bony frame. He looked like he'd aged 10 years, nothing like the confident man he used to be. Life with Diana was clearly not the romantic dream he'd imagined. Maya's sick, he said, his voice tired. Can you go see her? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. I don't want to. Even after half a year, I couldn't forget what it felt like to be that close to death, collapsed on the sofa while she looked the other way. Whether she was doing well or not had nothing to do with me anymore. But Leo wouldn't give up. He insisted, refused to leave, his stubbornness a familiar, annoying trait. Finally, worn down by his persistent, gloomy presence on my doorstep, I gave in. Annoyance, not concern, drove my decision. Fine, I sighed. Let's go. I had to see for myself what fresh disaster they had created. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and stale air, a scent that immediately brought back the claustrophobic fear of my own recent hospitalization. Leo walked slightly ahead of me, his shoulders slumped in a permanent state of defeat. He led me to a semi-private room. The sight that greeted me was a stark tableau of misery. Maya was propped up in bed, one side of her face a grotesque palette of purple and yellow bruises. Her left arm was in a sling. But it was her eyes that struck me most, wide, hollow, and filled with a terror I'd never seen in my defiant daughter. The moment she saw me, she burst into ragged, helpless tears. It wasn't a performance. This was raw, unvarnished pain. "Mom," she choked out, the word a wet, broken sound. She clumsily rolled up the sleeve of her hospital gown with her good arm, revealing more bruises, dark and fingerprint-shaped, marring her skin. "Mom, he's not even human." Leo stood by the window looking out, unable or unwilling to meet my gaze. "Marcus," Maya sobbed, her body shaking. "All he has is a pretty face and some charm. My body's covered in injuries. It's horrifying. He didn't just hit me. He gambled away everything I had. Took all my money and disappeared." I listened to her wails, my own heart a cold, still stone in my chest. Leo had already told me some of it on the agonizingly quiet drive over. After their cheap, rushed wedding, the honeymoon phase had been short-lived. Debt collectors had shown up at their door. Marcus was addicted to gambling. When Maya confronted him, the charm evaporated, revealing the monster beneath. The violence had escalated quickly. A cold, grim part of me wanted to shout, "I told you so. Serves you right." I had warned her. I had told her the truth about the man she was choosing over everyone who truly cared for her. She didn't listen. Now she was living the consequences. Once her sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths, I didn't waste time on sympathy or sugarcoating. I got straight to the point. "Get a divorce." He stared at me, stunned then hesitant. "Mom, I'm pregnant." The word hung in the sterile air, a new layer of tragedy. "Get an abortion," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "Short-term pain is better than a lifetime of suffering. A child born into a family like this won't be happy. A useless, gambling father. A broken home. That's hell mode from day one." Just thinking about it made my scalp prickle. Bringing an innocent life into that chaos was the height of irresponsibility. I want to keep the baby," she whispered, a flicker of her old stubbornness returning. I didn't try to convince her again. I knew that look. She hadn't given up. She still wanted to believe this was salvageable. She wanted to use the child as a tool to change a man who had no heart. It was a fantasy, a dangerous one. As I turned to leave, determined to remove myself from this vortex of bad decisions, I almost collided with Leo pushing Diana in her wheelchair. They were entering the room. Diana spotted me, and an unmistakable flicker of pure displeasure crossed her carefully composed face before she forced it into a mask of concern. She was thinner, her features sharper, her tragic heroine act looking more worn and desperate. "Maya is such a headstrong girl," Diana began, her tone sickeningly gentle. "She got married and now comes crying home every day. Clara, you really ought to talk some sense into her." I ignored her completely and turned my glare on Leo. "Your daughter got beaten like this and you still haven't called the police?" Leo hesitated, mumbling, "She doesn't act like a proper wife. There's always chaos in the house." Diana chimed in, her voice a syrupy poison. "We shouldn't air our dirty laundry. Calling the police would just bring shame on the family." I stared at the two of them, utterly speechless. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. If I hadn't kept their secrets back then, their reputations would have been in shambles long ago. The tension in the room was shattered by Maya's voice, sharp and shrill. "Shame? You took 200,000 from Dad. You used it to keep up your and Marcus's lifestyle." The accusation hung in the air. So that's where the dowry money had really gone. Neither of them worked. They'd lived off Leo's retirement money until it dried up, and then the real fighting must have started. Diana scoffed, her mask slipping entirely, revealing the petty, selfish woman beneath. "That money was mine anyway. What? You think I should have given it to someone else? I've earned it." That was the spark that lit the powder keg. Maya exploded. She jumped off the hospital bed, ignoring her injuries, and screamed, "Why can't my dad give me money? You don't do a damn thing all day. All you have to do is lie there, cry a few fake tears, and my dad throws cash at you like you're some kind of saint. Who the hell do you think you are?" I stood there in shock. Just a few months ago they were inseparable, a devoted mother-daughter duo. Now they were tearing each other apart like mortal enemies. It had only been half a year, but people and circumstances had changed in ways I never could have imagined. Diana was so furious she looked like she might pass out. Her eyes welled up with theatrical tears as she tilted her head dramatically. "Leo," she cried out, her voice a tragic melody. Maya pointed a trembling finger. "You're too old to be acting like this. That pathetic little cry. Why don't you go into acting?" The room went silent. Maya's savage one-liner had completely obliterated the mood. Leo, flustered and red-faced, quickly wheeled a sputtering Diana out of the room to escape the awkward tension. I stayed behind. I wasn't done. I wanted to hear the rest of this drama. I turned to Maya. "What exactly happened between you two? You used to be so close." She let out a long, exhausted sigh and sank back onto the bed. The fight had gone out of her. Turns out, after I refused to give her more money, she started pestering Dad. He planned to sell the big 4-bedroom apartment and downsize to a 2-bedroom. The plan was to split the extra cash, half for him, half for me. I raised an eyebrow. That was surprisingly fair of him. But Diana objected, Maya continued bitterly. She was adamant. Refused to let it happen. She said, "What kind of daughter keeps bleeding her father dry? With this kind of character, he can forget about relying on her in his old age." The irony was so thick it was almost funny. Diana, the ultimate drain on his resources, was accusing Maya of being a gold digger. "That finally got through to Dad," Maya muttered. He stopped pushing. In the end, I barely managed to scrape together 200,000 as a dowry. The wedding was a mess, cheap and embarrassing. People gossiped for weeks. Tears began streaming down her bruised cheeks again. Every time I went back to visit, he would give me that nasty look. And she's been whispering in his ear ever since, turning him against me. "People always say, when there's a stepmother, there's a stepfather too." They were right. I must have been blind to treat her like my real mom. I let out a long sigh. There's always a cause before there's a consequence. She had no one to blame but herself. I didn't say more, just told her to rest and heal. "Get rid of the baby," I added as I left. "If you can't stand on your own, no one else can carry you." The next day I stayed home to rest, hoping to finally find some peace. It was not to be. My doorbell rang and there stood Maya, discharged from the hospital too early, her face pale and drawn. The moment she stepped through the door, she fell to her knees and started bawling. "Mom, I was wrong. I swear I know now. Please, please save me." Before I could react, a shadow fell behind her. I looked up and saw him. Marcus. He swaggered in, grinning like a jackal as if he owned the place. "Mom," he said, the word oily and familiar on his tongue. "You're looking younger every day." Maya shrank behind me in terror, trembling. "Mom, he tied me up. He tortured me." Marcus waved his hand, laughing. It was a cold, empty sound. "Come on, couples fight. What's the big deal?" "Right, Mom?" The sheer audacity, the unshakable belief that he was untouchable, was infuriating. I really didn't want to get involved in their mess, but this time it had to be dealt with. He had followed her to my home, my sanctuary. No one was leaving until it was settled. Without another word, I pulled out my phone and dialed the police. That finally shook him. His grin vanished. "Come on, we were just messing around, that's all." I ignored him. I'd chosen this apartment partly because the police station was just downstairs. Personal safety was non-negotiable. An officer arrived quickly. After hearing what had happened, they took Marcus away and told us to come down later to make a formal statement. I turned to Maya, who was still crouched on the floor, a broken doll. "If you really want out, go to the hospital, get your injuries properly documented, get a medical report. Gather all your evidence. And when the time comes, take him to court." She looked up at me, her eyes clearing for the first time. "I want a divorce. I've had enough." Her hair was matted to her bruised face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was so stupid. I should have never left David." She gripped my hand tight, drowning in regret. But I pulled away. I glanced down at her fractured fingers, at the proof of her terrible choice, and said nothing. David. The son-in-law I'd personally picked. My former student. Handsome, well-educated, from a good family. When he found out Maya had cheated with Marcus, he didn't cause a scene. He'd come to me, knelt in front of me saying, "I'm sorry, Professor. I couldn't give your daughter the happiness she wanted." When they divorced, he was supposed to get a share of the marital assets, but I'd stopped him. "You were the one betrayed," I'd said. "What face do you have asking for anything?" I had wanted to find a partner for Maya who was her equal. Similar background, similar education, similar values. That's what makes a marriage stable. But she didn't appreciate it. She chose a man who couldn't meet her halfway and thought she'd find happiness in a mismatched relationship. What she got instead was disaster. Still, I wasn't completely heartless. I recommended a top-tier divorce lawyer to her. But I didn't get involved in what came after. This was her battle to fight. When everything finally settled down a month later, Marcus was sentenced to a year in prison for domestic abuse. The experience was enough to wake Maya up completely. She finally, definitively, gave up on the idea of remarrying him and terminated the pregnancy. She showed up at my door again looking hollowed out but clear-eyed. "Mom," she said, her voice small. Can I move in with you?" I looked at her, at the ghost of the daughter I once knew. The pain and betrayal of her past actions were still etched in my mind, fresh from my past life. I hadn't forgotten a thing. "No," I said softly, but with a finality that brooked no argument. "You need to learn to stand on your own." The door closed and I leaned against it, feeling the weight of the decision. It was cruel, perhaps. But it was necessary. For both of us. 2 days before Lunar New Year's Eve, a time traditionally meant for family reunion, my apartment was quiet. I expected to spend it alone, and for the first time the thought didn't sadden me. It felt peaceful. The intercom buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find Anna, grinning from ear to ear, her cheeks flushed from the cold. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood her older brother Mark, his wife Lena, and their 2 5-year-old twin boys. The whole family was there, their arms laden with bags and boxes, their faces beaming. "Aunt Clara," Anna announced, her voice full of joy. "This year we'll celebrate New Year's at your place. Next year you come to ours, okay? It'll be so lively with all of us." She looked at my surprised face and put on an exaggerated pout. "You're not going to kick us out, right?" On cue, all 5 of them, Anna, Mark, Lena, and the 2 little boys, put on identical pitiful puppy dog faces, trying to look extra sincere. My heart, that hardened, cautious organ, melted on the spot. 1,000 emotions surged in me: gratitude, warmth, a joy so profound it brought tears to my eyes. On a day meant for family, they had traveled all this way from their distant village just for me. For the first time, I truly, deeply believed in the innate goodness of people. "Of course not." I finally managed, ushering them all inside. "Get in here, it's freezing." The apartment, once so quiet, was instantly filled with noise and laughter. The twins, Liam and Leo, a name that made me wince only slightly, zoomed around, exploring everything with wide-eyed wonder. Lena immediately commandeered the kitchen, unpacking provisions from their village, home-cured meats, pickled vegetables, fresh noodles, and began preparing a feast. Mark, a quiet, sturdy man, started fixing a wobbly bookshelf without being asked. It was chaos. It was wonderful. On the 29th, we all went out as a big, noisy group to do some last-minute New Year shopping. The department store was a zoo, packed with people buying gifts and food. We were laughing, trying to keep track of the twins, when we noticed a commotion ahead. Curious, we moved closer. And there they were. Leo, Diana, and Maya. It was a pitiful scene. Diana's wheelchair had tipped over and she was lying on the floor, struggling. No one was helping her up. Why? Because Leo and Maya were locked in a heated argument, their voices rising above the crowd. We eavesdropped for a moment. The cause of the fight became clear. Diana had wanted a ridiculously expensive designer coat. Maya had refused to pay for it and was publicly shaming her. "Have you no shame?" Maya was yelling, her face contorted with anger. "At your age you think you deserve something this expensive? You think you're still some delicate flower?" Leo's face was flushed a deep, embarrassed red, but he said nothing. He just stood there, paralyzed, letting the scene spiral into a humiliating spectacle. Diana had buried her face in her arms, but whether from shame or fury I couldn't tell. I had no desire to engage. I turned to head toward the appliance section, but Maya spotted me. Her eyes lit up with a strange mix of desperation and triumph. She rushed over, grabbing my arm. "Mom, look, you never bought clothes that expensive for yourself. Why should she get to wear it?" I just chuckled. The truth was, Leo had always been stingy. Even without Maya there to oppose him, he would never have agreed to buy that coat. If he were truly willing, he wouldn't have just stood there frozen, letting his daughter throw a fit, letting his beloved Diana sit humiliated on the ground. No matter how romantic a man might have been in the beginning, time wears that down. Reality always wins in the end. I extricated my arm from her grip. "I'm shopping with my family now, Maya," I said calmly and gestured to Anna and the others waiting for me. The word family hit her like a physical blow. Her face fell. I walked into a nearby clothing store, one I knew was well out of Leo's budget. I tried on a few outfits, enjoying the feel of the fine fabrics. Anna, Lena, and the twins were my enthusiastic advisors. I picked several pieces I liked: a beautiful cashmere wrap, a tailored wool dress. When I went to pay, Maya suddenly shoved her card forward. "Mom, let me get this for you." It was a gesture, an attempt to buy back a connection she'd severed. But the moment she saw the total on the register, she froze, speechless. Her eyes widened. "Mom, you're really spending this much on yourself?" "Of course I am," I said coolly. "Every piece I buy now is quality, and it's not like I don't have money." Anna had not only paid me back the full 6 years of sponsorship, insisting on it with her stubborn pride, but she also shared a portion of her photography profits with me, calling it investment dividends. As I pulled out my phone to pay, the shop owner waved her hand. "That sweet girl already paid for you," she said, smiling and pointing at Anna. Anna leaned in and bumped my shoulder playfully. "I've always wanted Aunt Clara to be my mom. Can you just give me one chance to show it?" Mark and Lena stood beside her, nodding quickly, chiming in. "We're the ones who are lucky. Truly, we don't deserve her." Suddenly, the two twin boys ran up and wrapped their arms around my legs, tilting their little heads up. "All our friends have grandmas," Liam, or was it Leo, said, his voice small and earnest. "We want a grandma too." Tears I could no longer hold back streamed down my face as I laughed through them. I bent down and gathered them both in a hug. In the corner of my eye, I saw my old family, Leo, Diana, and Maya, watching the scene unfold from across the store aisle. Their expressions were unreadable, a complex mix of sorrow, regret, and bitter envy. Maya finally whispered, weak and pathetic, "Mom." I ignored her. Instead, I turned to Anna, took her hand in mine, and squeezed it. My gaze was gentle. "What do you want to look at next, sweetheart?" "Mom, you're buying this for me? Wow, I'm so happy. I finally have a mom who loves me." Anna's voice was bright with performative joy, a deliberate show for our audience. Their excited voices practically pierced the clouds, ringing out through the store. They surrounded me, linking their arms through mine, leading me toward the shoe department. Everyone insisted on paying for my things, each one trying to outdo the other in their generosity. As I took off my old, sensible coat, it felt like I was shedding the burdens of the past, letting go of years of pain and resentment. With each elegant new piece I tried on, it felt like I was dressing for a new chapter. In this lifetime I had restarted everything. And happiness, true, warm, blooming, generous happiness, was finally taking root deep in my heart. My journey into the future, surrounded by this chosen family, was only just beginning. The past, with all its bitterness, was finally, completely behind me. The New Year celebration with Anna's family was unlike any I had ever experienced. It was loud, messy, and filled with an unpretentious joy that seeped into the very walls of my apartment. We cooked dumplings together, the twins flowering everything in sight. We set off fireworks from the balcony, their small faces lit up with wonder. We ate until we were stuffed, laughing and sharing stories late into the night. For the first time, the holiday felt like what it was always supposed to be: a celebration of connection. The peace lasted a week after they returned to their village. The apartment was quiet again, but the echo of their laughter remained, a warm blanket against the winter chill. I was content, rediscovering the simple pleasure of my own company, of a life curated entirely by my own desires. The knock on the door when it came was hesitant, unassuming. A world away from Maya's entitled buzzing or Leo's frustrated pounding. I opened it to find Diana. She was alone, maneuvering her wheelchair with obvious difficulty. She looked diminished. The carefully cultivated aura of tragic grace was gone, replaced by a shrunken weariness. Her expensive clothes were rumpled, and there was a faint, unpleasant scent of neglect about her. "Clara," she said, her voice a dry rustle. No false tears, no dramatic tremor. Just exhaustion. May I come in? Just for a moment." Every instinct screamed to shut the door. This woman was the architect of so much pain. But the sheer pathetic nature of her presence, the complete absence of her usual weapons, gave me pause. Against my better judgment I moved aside. She wheeled herself in, her eyes taking in my clean, peaceful space. I saw a flicker of something that might have been envy. "I won't take much of your time," she began, wringing her hands in her lap, a nervous, genuine gesture I'd never seen from her before. I need to apologize." I stayed silent, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "I thought I was entitled to it," she continued, not meeting my eyes. "To him. To a life that was stolen from me. The accident, it felt like a second chance. I thought Leo's guilt was my currency to buy back what we'd lost." She finally looked up and her eyes were bleak. "I was a fool. You can't build a life on a foundation of guilt and manipulation. It rots from the inside out." He told me a story then, a bleak and petty one. How the initial intensity had faded. How Leo's guilt had curdled into resentment under the daily grind of caregiving. How his frugality, which I'd always battled, had become a wall between them. The romantic dream of being together had dissolved into arguments over money, over who changed the bedsheets, over the sheer, boring drudgery of it all. "He's not the man I remembered," she whispered. "And I'm certainly not the woman he pined for. We're just two old people trapped in a house full of regret." She had come, she said, because she had nowhere else to go. Her son in the States, whom she'd always boasted about, wanted nothing to do with the drama. Leo and Maya were locked in their own Cold War, and she was the inconvenient pawn in the middle. "I am truly sorry, Clara," she said, and for the first time it sounded real. "For the pain I caused you. For the family I helped break. It was a hollow victory. I got what I wanted, and it's ashes." I listened to her confession, this woman who had been my nemesis. There was no satisfaction in it. Only a profound, weary sadness. We had all lost. We had all been fools in our own ways. "What will you do?" I asked, my voice neutral. She shrugged, a hopeless little movement. "I don't know. Apply for state care, perhaps. A facility. It's not what I wanted, but it's what I have left." She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't suggest a reconciliation or beg for help. She just sat there, stripped of all her pretenses, a lonely, broken woman facing the consequences of her life. After a few more minutes of strained silence, she turned her wheelchair around. "Thank you for listening," she said, and wheeled herself out. I closed the door behind her, my mind reeling. The encounter left me unsettled. The monster I had built up in my head was just a sad, lonely woman. It was a disorienting, almost disappointing revelation. A few days later, Leo showed up. He looked even more haggard than before. The encounter in the department store had clearly taken its toll. "Diana was here," I said, not a question. He flinched. "She told you." "She did." He sank onto my sofa without invitation, his head in his hands. "It's a nightmare, Clara. A constant, draining nightmare. The complaining, the neediness. It's endless. And Maya. She's there all the time now, but it's like she's haunting the place. He just glares at me, at Diana. The house is a morgue." He was talking to me like a colleague, a co-parent debriefing after a difficult shift. The intimacy of it was jarring. "I made a mistake," he said, the words so quiet I almost didn't hear them. "A terrible, terrible mistake." I didn't respond. What was there to say? "I told you so" felt childish. Forgiveness was out of the question. I think I just missed the idea of her," he continued, almost to himself. "The girl she was. Not the woman she became. And I was so busy chasing that ghost, I didn't see the partner I had right in front of me." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "You were always so capable, Clara. You handled everything. I never had to think. I think I resented you for that, too. It was easier to paint you as the shrew than to admit I was lacking. It was the closest I would ever get to an apology. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to erase decades of emotional neglect. But it was a moment of shocking, painful clarity for him. "What will you do?" I asked him the same question I'd asked Diana. "I don't know," he sighed. "Sell the house. Use the money to put her in a good home. It's the least I can do. I don't know. Live in a small apartment. Be alone." The picture he painted was one of utter loneliness. He had burned his world down for a fantasy, and now he was left sitting in the ashes. He left soon after, a broken man. I felt a pang of something, not love, not anymore, but a distant human pity. We had shared a life, a daughter, decades. Seeing him so reduced was like watching a building I'd once lived in collapse. A week passed. Then came Maya. She didn't buzz. I found her sitting on the floor in the hallway outside my apartment, her head resting on her knees. She looked up when I opened the door, her eyes raw. "He's selling the house," she said flatly. "My home. He's selling it to pay for her care." I gestured for her to come in. She looked like she needed a cup of tea. She sat at my kitchen table, clutching the mug like a lifeline. "I went to see David," she whispered. That got my attention. I sat down opposite her. I apologized. For everything. The cheating, the lies, the way I treated him. A tear slid down her nose and plopped into her tea. "He was kind. So kind it made it worse. He said he hoped I found happiness but that he'd moved on. He's seeing someone else. A teacher at his school." She looked at me, her expression utterly lost. "I threw it all away, Mom. I threw everything away for a fantasy. For a man who beat me. For a father who chose a stranger over me. For a," she choked on the word, "a stepmother who saw me as a rival for money." He was finally, truly seeing the board. And all the moves she had made were disastrous. "I have nothing," she said, the words a hollow confession. "No husband. No home. No family. I'm 37 years old and I have to start over from nothing." I didn't offer her platitudes. I didn't tell her it would be okay. Because it might not be. The consequences of her actions were hers to bear. But I also saw my daughter in there, buried under the layers of poor choices and inherited selfishness. The little girl who used to follow me around the garden. "What will you do?" I asked for the third time. She took a shuddering breath. "I found a job. Receptionist at a law firm. It's not much, but it's a start. I've rented a room in a shared house." She looked around my clean, quiet apartment. "I won't ask to stay here. I don't deserve that. I wanted you to know. That I know. How wrong I was." It was a start. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But an acknowledgement. A first, fragile step toward accountability. She finished her tea and stood to leave. At the door she hesitated. "Mom," she said, her voice small. "Thank you. For not saying I told you so." Then she was gone. I stood alone in my kitchen, the ghosts of my past swirling around me. Diana's despair, Leo's regret, Maya's shattered illusions. They had all come to my door, seeking absolution or just a witness to their downfall. I felt no triumph. Only a deep, quiet sense of closure. The saga was over. The battle I had fought so hard in my first life had ended not with a bang, but with a series of quiet whimpers from the other side. They had finally seen the reality of the choices they'd made. And I was free. Truly, completely free. Not just of them, but of the anger I'd carried for them. Their misery was their own. It no longer had anything to do with me. With the past finally, definitively laid to rest, a new energy coursed through me. The world wasn't just something to be survived. It was a place to be explored, to be tasted, to be devoured. Anna and I fell into a rhythm. We became travel partners, content creators, and in many ways business partners. Our online presence grew. We were no longer just a heartwarming story, we were a brand. Aunt Clara and Anna had a following. People were invested in our adventures, in our dynamic. The wise, witty older woman and the energetic, talented young photographer. Brands reached out for collaborations. A luggage company sent us their latest suitcases. A skincare line for mature adventurers wanted a sponsorship. A travel agency offered us an all-expenses-paid trip to Iceland in exchange for a series of posts. We were making more money than I ever had as a professor. It was absurd and wonderful. The internet, which I had once viewed with suspicion, had become a gateway to a life of unimaginable freedom. We went to Iceland. We stood under the shimmering veil of the northern lights, the cold air sharp in our lungs, and I felt a sense of awe so profound it brought tears to my eyes. We swam in the geothermal blue lagoon, steam rising around us like we were in a dream. We hiked on glaciers, the ice cracking and groaning beneath our feet, a sound of pure ancient power. In Italy, we got lost in the winding streets of Venice, ate gelato until we felt sick, and pretended to be aristocrats in a crumbling palazzo. In Japan, we stayed in a traditional ryokan, slept on futons and soaked in an outdoor onsen surrounded by falling cherry blossoms. With each trip I felt myself expanding. I learned phrases in new languages. I tried foods I couldn't pronounce. I met people whose lives were entirely different from my own and I learned from them. The world was so much bigger and more beautiful than the four walls of an unhappy home. Anna was the perfect companion. She handled the logistics, the negotiations, the technical side of our online presence. She encouraged me to try new things, to be silly in front of the camera, to tell stories from my past that I'd never shared with anyone. One evening, sitting on a balcony overlooking the Santorini caldera, she turned to me. "Aunt Clara, I've been thinking." "A dangerous pastime," I teased. She smiled. "I'm serious. We have a platform. A voice. We should use it for something more than just selling luggage." "What did you have in mind?" "A foundation," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "A small one. To help girls like me. Girls in rural areas with good grades and big dreams but no means. We could offer scholarships. Not just for tuition but for living expenses, for books, for a laptop." The idea took my breath away. It was a full-circle moment. The help I had given her, once a solitary act of kindness, could now be multiplied. "We could call it the Second Chance Foundation," I said softly. Anna's face lit up. "Perfect." We started working on it immediately between trips. We used our platform to promote it and the response was overwhelming. Our followers who had followed our journey from pain to joy were eager to be a part of it. Donations poured in. Small ones, large ones. Stories from other women who had been given a second chance. It became the most meaningful part of our work. The travel was glorious, but this was a legacy. One afternoon back home I was reviewing foundation applications when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Clara?" a frail voice asked. It was Diana. "She was in a care home," she said. "It was nice enough. Cling. Leo had done that much for her. She was lonely but she was comfortable. She was calling because she'd seen one of our posts online about the foundation." I have some money," she said haltingly. "Not much. From the sale of my old apartment abroad. I never told Leo about it. I want to donate it. To your foundation." I was speechless. "I never had a daughter," she continued, her voice thick. "I never did anything that mattered. Maybe this can. Maybe it can help one girl not make the same mistakes I did." I took her details and promised the money would be used well. The call ended and I sat for a long time thinking about redemption and how it can come in the most unexpected forms. Leo called me once too. He was in his small apartment. He'd taken up painting of all things. Terrible paintings, he said, but it made him happy. He asked about Maya. I told him she was doing okay, working, building her life back slowly. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm glad," he said finally. And I believed he meant it. Maya and I met for coffee sometimes. It was stilted at first but gradually became easier. We would never have the relationship we could have had, but the hostility was gone. Replaced by a cautious, mutual respect. She was learning to stand on her own 2 feet and I was learning to see her as an adult separate from me. One spring afternoon Anna and I were in a park near my apartment, filming a segment for our channel. We were talking about new beginnings. Anna was behind the camera and I was speaking directly to our audience, to all the women who felt trapped by their circumstances. "It is never too late," I said, the words feeling utterly true. "Your life is not a book whose ending is already written. You can pick up the pen at any time and start a new chapter. It takes courage. It takes a willingness to let go of what was, to grieve it and to step into the unknown. But I am here to tell you the unknown is beautiful. It is full of light." I saw Anna smiling behind the camera, her eyes glistening. She lowered it. "That was perfect, Aunt Clara." We packed up our gear and started walking home. The sun was warm on my face. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, painting the sidewalks pink. "Where to next?" Anna asked, looping her arm through mine. I looked up at the wide blue sky. The world was vast and waiting. "Anywhere," I said, squeezing her arm. "Everywhere." I had gone from a woman dying of exhaustion, buried without knowing why, to a woman reborn. I had a chosen daughter, a purpose that extended beyond myself, and a passport full of stamps. The past was a closed book. The future was an open road. And I was finally, joyfully driving. The end.